Halfway through my pregnancy, I sat on the bathroom floor with his phone in my shaking hands, staring at 2 years of messages he swore never existed. The man I'd built my entire life around, the man I'd followed across oceans, had been living a second life the whole time, and I was the only one who hadn't been let in on it. The tile under me was cold enough to feel through my leggings, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should get up before my back started to ache, before the baby felt whatever it was my body was doing. But I couldn't move. My thumb kept scrolling on its own, the way you keep pressing a bruise to confirm it's real. The bathroom fan was running. I'd turned it on out of habit, the way I always did so he wouldn't hear me, and now its low rattle was the only sound in the world. A small mechanical drone that seemed to be narrating the end of my life back to me. Let me go back, because to understand how I ended up on that cold tile floor, you have to understand how completely I once believed in us. We met in 2017, Marcus and I. It happened fast, the kind of fast that people warn you about and you don't listen because you're too busy feeling like the universe finally got something right. We started dating, and within that same year we were married. I know how that sounds now. I know. But back then it felt like two puzzle pieces that had been drifting around the table for years, scraping against the wrong edges, finally clicking into the one place they were always meant to fit. I'd never felt that before. That certainty. I remember telling my best friend that I'd stopped looking, because what was the point of looking when you'd already found the thing everyone else was still searching for? She'd laughed at me over coffee, my best friend, stirring sugar into a mug she never actually drank from. "Slow down," she said, gentle but real, the way only an old friend can be. "You don't even know his middle name yet." And I remember the flush of irritation I felt, because I thought she just didn't understand, that she'd never had what I had, and so she was measuring my whole life against the small ruler of her own caution. I told her some things you can't slow down for. I told her you don't put the brakes on lightning. I look back at that girl now, that bright, sure 20-something girl with her whole chest full of light, and I want to take her hands and hold them still, just for a second, just long enough to make her listen. In those early days, he made me feel like the most cared-for woman alive. Marcus was a simple man, and I mean that as the highest compliment I knew how to give back then. He worked hard. He woke up before the sun and came home tired in the good way, the way that meant he was building something for us. When I had a job, he never once asked me to chip in for rent, for gas, for our dinners out. The only thing I covered was groceries, and even that he'd wave off half the time, telling me to keep my money for myself. "I take care of my wife," he'd say, like it was the most obvious law of the universe. And he did. He told me he loved me every single day, and he didn't just say it, he showed it in the way he'd warm up my car in winter, in the way he remembered the little things I'd mentioned once in passing and surprised me with them weeks later. I was thankful. God, I was so thankful. I tried to pour it all back into him, to be the support system underneath everything he carried, to be the soft place he landed. I think about the mornings most. He had this ritual, coffee for both of us, mine with too much cream because he knew I had a sweet tooth I was embarrassed about, his black as the dark he woke up in. He'd set my mug on the nightstand on my side before he left, still steaming, and half the time I'd sleep right through it and find it cold an hour later. A little skin formed on the top. But it was there. That was the thing. Even cold, it was proof that someone had thought of me before the sun was even up. For years afterward, I'd find myself looking at that nightstand in the morning, and the ghost of that mug would sit there, and I'd have to swallow something down before I could start my day. There were the notes, too. He wasn't a man of many words out loud. That should have told me more than it did, but in the beginning he'd leave little scraps of paper folded into my bag, my coat pocket, the visor of my car. Nothing poetic. "Have a good one, beautiful. See you tonight." Once, just a clumsy little drawing of a heart that looked more like a potato. I kept them all in a shoebox. I want you to know that. I kept every single one because I was a woman collecting evidence of being loved, the way you'd press flowers, never imagining you'd one day be collecting a different kind of evidence entirely. But there was another Marcus, too, and I learned him slowly, the way you learn the cracks in a house you've already moved into. He was grumpy. It was his way or no way, and when it wasn't his way, he could turn mean, not loud mean, but cold mean. Avoidant. He hated when I asked how his day went. A simple "how was work?" could make his jaw tighten like I'd accused him of something. And he was a liar. Not about small things, not about who ate the last of the leftovers. He was a good liar about the things that mattered, the things that, if I'd been a different woman, would have ended us years earlier. When I try to bring up something hard, something that actually needed two people to sit in a room and untangle, he'd simply shut me out. Complete silence. He'd wait me out, day after day, until he decided I'd either forgotten or given up and moved on like the thing had never happened at all. And here's the part it took me years to even name. Every time I caught him in a lie, a gift would appear. Something expensive. Something shiny enough to make me feel guilty for being upset. I didn't see the pattern at first. You don't when you're inside it. You just think your husband is generous. I remember the first time the silence really frightened me. It wasn't anything dramatic. I'd asked him, softly, over dinner, why he'd come home 3 hours late without a text. And he just stopped, set down his fork, looked at a spot on the wall about a foot to the left of my head, and chewed and said nothing. I asked again, smaller this time, already apologizing with my tone. Nothing. He finished his plate, rinsed it, and went to bed. The next morning he acted like the dinner had never happened, like I dreamed the whole thing, and when I tried to bring it back up he gave me that flat, faraway look that I would come to know like the back of my own hand. The look that said the door was closed and there was no knocking that would open it. By the third day, a bracelet appeared on the kitchen counter. No card. Just the box sitting there like a verdict. And the worst part, the part I'm ashamed of, is that I put it on. I wore it. I let the gift do its job. The first crack I couldn't paint over came in 2020. The pandemic was still fresh, and my work had moved home. So I was at the kitchen table all day staring at a laptop and the same four walls. Then Marcus told me his job required us to relocate. I knew that was part of the deal when I married him. His work moved people around, and I'd signed up for that life with my eyes open. So I started bracing myself for it. Leaving my family, leaving the friends I'd had since childhood, finding a brand new job in a brand new place, learning a whole new town from scratch. I told myself I was strong enough to do that for our marriage. Those weeks before the move had a strange, suspended quality to them, the way time gets when you know you're about to lose the shape of your days. I started saying goodbye to things without telling anyone that's what I was doing. The diner where my mother and I had breakfast every Saturday for as long as I could remember. The walking trail behind my parents' house where I'd learned to ride a bike. I'd drive past the high school, past my old friends' houses, taking long ways home, memorizing streets I'd known my whole life like I'd need them later in the dark. I didn't cry. I told myself this was what adult love asked of you, that you sacrifice the geography of your childhood for the future of your marriage, and you do it without making your husband feel like the sacrifice was a burden. I was so proud of how little I complained. I thought that was strength. Now I understand it was just practice for all the silence to come. But right before we were set to leave, I found the photo. It was on his phone, saved, tucked away where he thought I'd never look. A half-naked picture of a woman I worked with. My coworker. My stomach dropped through the floor. When I confronted him, he had an answer ready, the way he always did. He said he was just sharing it with a coworker. I knew it was a lie. I knew it the way you know your own name. But the conversation never got resolved because resolving things required him to participate, and he refused. I was simply expected to absorb it, to file it away, to accept that it happened and keep walking. And I had a decision to make. Leave him right there, stay behind, or follow him into the relocation with that wound still wide open. I want to tell you what it does to a person, that kind of unresolved thing. It doesn't go away. It goes underground. It lives in your body, in the way you check his phone screen when it lights up on the counter, in the way you scan a room when his old coworkers come up in conversation, in the way you smile a half-second too late at a barbecue because part of you is always doing math. I'd lie next to him at night and listen to him breathe, deep and untroubled. The sleep of a man with nothing weighing on him, and I'd marvel at it. How can he sleep like that, I'd think, when I'm lying here drowning? It never once occurred to me back then that he slept so soundly because he had simply decided the problem was solved. Solved by my silence, solved by the gift, solved by his refusal to ever speak of it again. He'd closed the file. I was the only one still reading it. I went with him, still hurting, still carrying that photo behind my eyes every time I closed them, but telling myself the same thing I always told myself. We're a married couple and married couples overcome things. We could overcome this. I packed up my whole life and I followed the man who just lied to my face, because I believed in the version of him who warmed up my car in winter. The drive to the new place took 2 full days. 2 days in the cab of a truck with the man I was both furious at and desperate to be close to, and we barely spoke for most of it. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the gear shift, country radio turned low, and every so often he'd reach over and squeeze my knee like nothing in the world was wrong, and I'd feel that awful split right down the center of me. The half that wanted to lean into his hand and the half that wanted to throw the door open at 60 miles an hour and walk back home along the shoulder. I watched my home state shrink in the side mirror until it was gone, until the landscape turned into a kind of country I didn't recognize, and somewhere in those miles I made a quiet bargain with myself that I'd give it everything. I'd build us a real life here, away from everyone who knew us, and the distance would be a fresh start instead of a punishment. That's how good I'd gotten at it by then, turning my own losses into something I could be proud of. When we arrived, he bought a house we genuinely could not afford, and when I balked at it, he told me it was for my birthday. A birthday gift. A whole house. And there it was again, that pattern I still couldn't see clearly. The bigger the lie, the bigger the bow on top. Now I was scrambling to find work to help carry a mortgage I never asked for. And in the middle of that scramble, I had to fly back to my hometown for a family member's birthday. The house was beautiful, I'll give it that. Too beautiful. It had more rooms than 2 people could fill. High ceilings that swallowed our voices. A kitchen island I'd run my hand along and feel sick about every time I remembered the number on the mortgage statement. I'd walk through it at night when I couldn't sleep, room to empty room, my footsteps echoing, and it felt less like a home than like a stage set built for a happier couple who hadn't moved in yet. He'd present it to me like a prize. Do you know how many guys could give their wife a house like this? And I'd nod and say thank you, because what else do you say? But inside I was already calculating how many extra shifts I'd have to find to keep us from drowning in a gift I'd never asked for. That was the trick of his generosity, the one I only understood much later. The gifts were never really for me. They were down payments on my silence, and somehow I always ended up paying the interest. I was only home for a week. 1 week. And in that 1 week, I found out that my husband had been married before. Married. To his ex when I asked him about it, he looked me dead in the eye and explained that she wasn't an ex-wife at all. She was a friend, and the marriage was just a way to bring in more income. I know exactly how that sounds reading it now, how obviously, insultingly stupid it is, but I want you to understand where my head was. I was naive and I was in love, and love makes you want to believe the person you love so badly that you'll hand them excuses you'd never accept from anyone else. So I believed him. Or I told myself I believed him, which is its own kind of lie. I tried to call him from my hometown to talk it through. I tried to message him, to lay it all out so we could finally have one honest conversation. He ignored me. For days. Right up until I had to board my flight back to him with absolutely no idea whether we'd ever even speak of it. It was a cousin who let it slip, of all people, at the birthday dinner, over a plate of cake, completely casual. Back when Marcus was married the first time, and the whole table seemed to keep talking while the room tilted sideways around me. I remember setting my fork down very carefully, the way you do when you're afraid your hands might do something you can't control. I excused myself to the bathroom of my aunt's house and sat on the edge of the tub. Always a bathroom floor, always a bathroom, the rooms where I did my real living in that marriage, and I stared at my phone and tried to figure out how a person could have a whole entire marriage you'd never heard a word about. Not a mention. Not a photograph. Not a slip of the tongue in 3 years. That's not forgetting to tell someone something. That is the careful, deliberate construction of a blank space where the truth should be. I went back. Of course I went back. And when I did, the topic of his ex-wife was sealed shut. Never allowed to be brought up ever again. That was the rule. He drew the line and I lived inside it. The rules. There were so many of them by then, though I never could have listed them out if you'd asked. They weren't written anywhere. They were just things I'd learned not to do, the way you learn not to touch a stove. Don't ask about the ex-wife. Don't ask about the late nights. Don't ask how work went. Don't bring up the photo. Don't push when the door closes. Each rule started as a single bad night and hardened over time into law, and the strangest thing is that I enforced them on myself more strictly than he ever did. I'd feel a question rising in my throat and I'd swallow it before it could reach the air. Already exhausted by the silence I knew it would summon. I built my own cage bar by bar, and I told myself I was being a good wife. Patient wife. The kind of wife who keeps the peace. I didn't yet understand that there's a difference between peace and just being too tired to fight. Then came 2021, and with it the longest stretch of loneliness I'd ever known. His work took him to another country for 8 or 9 months. Alone. The pandemic was still keeping the world locked down, so I couldn't exactly go out and build a new circle of friends in a place where I already knew no one. So I did what I always did, I adapted. I found a job that swallowed my days whole, 8 to 5, 6 days a week, and I was grateful for it because a busy mind is a mind that can't sit still long enough to ache. I was already used to Marcus not really communicating. That wasn't new. So when he was gone, our entire relationship shrank down to 2 short phone calls a day. One quick call before I went to sleep, which was his morning in his time zone, and one at my lunch break, which was his bedtime. 2 short calls. That was the whole marriage for nearly a year. And the thing that breaks my heart now is that I was content with it. It was enough for me. In my mind, we were solid. Faithful. 2 people doing long distance the right way, holding the thread taut across an ocean. I built little rituals around those 2 calls the way prisoners build rituals around mail. The lunch call I'd take in my car in the parking lot of work. Windows up. My sad little sandwich going untouched on the passenger seat because I'd rather spend the whole break hearing his voice than eating. He'd be getting into bed on his end, voice gone soft and gravelly with tiredness, and I'd close my eyes and pretend the distance was nothing. Pretend I could feel the weight of him settling onto a mattress half a world away. The night call was shorter, usually. His morning, him rushing, half distracted. The clink of a spoon in a coffee cup, doors opening and closing in the background. I never thought to ask whose doors. I never thought to ask anything. I'd just say I loved him into the phone and hang up and lie there in our 2 big bed in our 2 big house, holding the silence like it was something we were building together. I had no idea that on the other end of that thread, the man I was being faithful to had created an entirely separate world. Later that same year, the call I'll never forget. Someone back home, someone very close to me, had passed away. And in that single moment, I felt the floor of my own existence give way. Like everything I thought I was standing on had just been an illusion, and now I was falling through it. I flew home. I tried to be there for the people who were grieving alongside me, but I couldn't even grieve properly myself. There was no room, no quiet, no soft place to set the weight down. When I came back, I quit my job. I didn't have it in me anymore. Looking back, I'm almost certain I slid into a real depression, the kind that fogs the windows of your whole life, and I just couldn't see out. I remember the airport on the way home for the funeral. I remember sitting at the gate with my carry-on between my feet, looking at all the ordinary people around me. A man eating a pretzel, a kid kicking the back of a chair, a couple asleep on each other's shoulders, and feeling a kind of vertigo at how the world just kept going. How could the pretzel man not know? How could the gate agent call boarding groups in that bright, even voice when something at the center of my life had just been ripped out? I wanted to call Marcus from that gate and have him say the thing that would hold me together. I did call him, and he was kind in the clipped way he had, said the right words in the right order, but they came down the line flat and prepackaged, like he was reading them off a card, and when I hung up I felt lonelier than before I dialed. That was the moment, I think, though I didn't know it then, the moment I started to understand that I could be married and still be completely alone in my grief. What would you have done in this situation? Stayed in the fog or forced yourself to crawl out of it? Let me know in the comments, because I didn't know either. Marcus came home from his deployment, but by then I was a ghost of myself, moving through the rooms of that too expensive house like a stranger. We did our own things. He discovered online gaming, really discovered it the way some people discover religion, and he buried himself in group voice calls with people I'd never met, while I sat in another room filling journal after journal, trying to write my way back to solid ground after the death I'd never been allowed to mourn. We were present but not present. In the same house, sometimes the same room, but the thread between us had gone slack and neither of us was pulling it tight anymore. That lasted years. Years of two people sharing an address and a last name and almost nothing else. I kept those journals in a drawer under my side of the bed, and I filled them in a cramped, furious handwriting I barely recognized as my own. I wrote to the person I'd lost. I wrote things I couldn't say out loud in a house where saying things out loud only ever got me silence. Some nights I'd hear him through the wall. The laughter, the easy back and forth, the camaraderie of strangers on his headset, and I'd press my pen so hard into the page it tore through, because there it was, the conversation, the warmth, the connection, all of it pouring out of him freely into a microphone for people he'd never met, while I sat 10 feet away starved for a single real sentence. I never once let myself name what I was feeling. If I'd written the word jealous, I might have had to do something about it. So I just wrote around it in circles for years, filling drawer after drawer with the evidence of a marriage slowly going cold. And then, in 2024, something I'd long stopped hoping for. I got pregnant. We'd tried so many times in the early years and it had never taken. So somewhere along the line I'd quietly grieved the idea of ever being a mother and tucked it away with all the other things I didn't let myself want. But there it was. 2 lines. We were both genuinely, breathlessly excited. For a moment, I let myself believe a baby might be the thread that pulled us back together, that we'd both reach for the same rope at last. I took the test in the morning while he was still asleep, and when those 2 lines came up I just stood there in the bathroom, that room again, with my hand over my mouth, shaking, not even daring to believe my own eyes. I'd seen so many single lines over the years that the sight of 2 genuinely confused me for a second. Like a word you've stared at so long it stops looking real. I woke him up. I actually woke him up, which I never did, and I held the little stick out to him with my hands trembling. And for 1 perfect minute the old Marcus was there. The coffee on the nightstand Marcus, the warm up the car Marcus. And he pulled me into him and laughed into my hair and said we were going to be a family, and I let myself fall all the way into that minute. I let myself believe it. I think I needed to believe it more than I'd ever needed anything. And so I did, fully, the way I always had, with my whole reckless heart. That hope lasted exactly until I went looking for him in the only place he seemed to live anymore. His screens. Marcus had become more obsessed with gaming than ever. Locked in those group voice calls at all hours, headset on, the blue light painting his face in the dark. I supported it. I told myself a man needs an outlet, especially one as closed off as him. But halfway through my pregnancy, belly already round, ankles already swelling, I found everything. Not one thing, everything, all at once. Like a dam I'd been quietly leaning against for 9 years finally let go. Started so small. That's what I want people to understand, it always starts so small. His phone buzzed on the nightstand while he was in the shower, and a name lit up the screen. A name with a little heart emoji beside it that my own name had never earned in 9 years of marriage. I wasn't even snooping. I was reaching over to silence it so it wouldn't wake me up later, the way I'd silenced his phone 1,000 harmless times. But that heart, that stupid little heart next to a name I didn't know. I sat up in the dark with my heart slamming against the baby and I told myself it was nothing. It was a game friend. It was a guy. It was the same nothing it always turned out to be. And then I picked up the phone and I started reading, and the nothing became everything in the space of about 4 minutes. He had been cheating on me since 2022. 2 years. With a woman he'd met online through the very gaming calls I'd been so understanding about. When I first stumbled on the name, he actually tried to tell me she was a man. That I was confused, that I didn't understand his online friends. As if that explained the flirting. Because there was flirting with her and with others, multiple women, and the part that gutted me most. Those women knew he was married. They knew about me. I was the punchline they all shared. Then I found the account, the kind of account you create to sell yourself, and the timeline matched exactly to those 8 or 9 months he'd been alone, overseas in 2021, the months I'd been so proud of us for surviving. He denied it. He always denied it. But there was evidence. There's always evidence when you finally know where to look. Terabytes of saved images and videos, the kind that had clearly been swallowing him whole for years. And accounts. Plural. Hidden corners of the internet where a different Marcus had been living loud while the one I married stayed silent at our dinner table. I sat on that bathroom floor for what must have been an hour, just scrolling, my own reflection floating ghost pale in the dark window above the sink whenever I happened to glance up. Every message I opened was another floorboard pulled out from under 9 years. There were the months I'd spent crying over a death he couldn't comfort me through. And there he was, in the same weeks, pouring himself out to a stranger, charming and tender and present in a way he hadn't been with me in years. There were the nights I'd lain awake jealous of a headset, and now I knew the headset had been the least of it. The 2 short phone calls a day I'd been so proud of, the taut thread across the ocean. I found the other end of it now, and it was tied to nothing. It had never been tied to me at all. The whole faithful long-distance marriage I'd carried like a trophy had been a performance staged for an audience of one, and I was both the audience and the only fool in the room. I confronted him with all of it, my hands on my pregnant belly like I could shield the baby from the words. And he did what he had always done, the only thing he truly knew how to do. He denied. He shut me out. And he left me standing there, alone again, in the home we shared, hollowed out and shaking. I was completely blindsided, truly blindsided, betrayed in a way that doesn't have a clean word for it. Shattered, like something dropped from a great height, the pieces too small and too many to ever gather back up. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. We post new stories every day, and trust me, the way this one turns is not the way I expected. Because here's where I have to tell you the truth about what came next. And it's not the clean ending you might be bracing for. I keep waiting, even now, for the part of the story where I get strong. Where I stand up off the bathroom floor and pack a bag and slam a door and the music swells. That's how these stories are supposed to go, isn't it? The woman finds the messages. The woman leaves. The woman blossoms. I've watched 100 of those stories myself, nodding along, thinking, yes, that's what I'd do. That's what any woman with any self-respect would do. So believe me, no one is more disappointed than I am that my story didn't bend that way. Because real life isn't a montage. Real life is a country that isn't yours, a baby on the way, a bank account with someone else's name on it, and a man standing in the doorway between you and every exit there is. It's 2026 now. And in some small, grudging ways, Marcus has improved at communicating, I think. Maybe. The bar was on the floor, so it doesn't take much to step over it. But in every way that actually matters, he's gotten worse. The compulsions around the images got darker and more constant after I found out. Not better. To this day, I genuinely don't know whether he's still cheating on me or not. And the not knowing is its own slow poison. He shows no real willingness to change. I begged for marriage counseling. Surely a stranger in a room could help us say the things we couldn't. And he refused flat out because opening up and communicating is the one thing he spent his entire life avoiding. And he wasn't about to start now, not even to save us. So I brought up the only door I had left. Divorce. And he is fiercely, immovably against it. Which makes no sense to me, none at all, and I've turned it over 1,000 times in the dark. Why would a man fight so hard to keep a woman he doesn't love or respect? If I'm just the silent housekeeper, the warm body in the other room, the wife he lies to and hides from, why not let me go? I couldn't make the math work until slowly, painfully, I started to understand the answer, and the answer was uglier than the question. Because while I was here, exhausting myself trying to connect, trying to communicate, trying to perform CPR on a marriage that had flatlined years ago, he was finally getting exactly what he'd always wanted from me. Silence. His peace. His privacy. The freedom to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, with no one asking how his day was, no one expecting a real conversation, no one wanting more from him than he was willing to give. I had become the perfect wife for him at last, the one who'd stopped asking. It took me an embarrassingly long time to see it from his side, but once I did, I couldn't unsee it. Think about what I provide him, sitting here quiet. A clean house, a child he gets to be a good father to, the respectable shape of a marriage to show the world, the wife at the unit functions, the family photo. And in exchange, he has to give exactly nothing of himself. No honesty, no conversation, no accounting for his nights. From where he stands, I'm not a problem to be solved. I'm the solution. I'm the arrangement that lets him have every freedom of a single man with none of the loneliness. Every comfort of marriage with none of its demands. Of course, he won't let me go. Why would anyone walk away from a deal that good? I just happened to be the one paying for it, with the only currency I had left, which was myself. So I stopped. I don't ask how his day was anymore. I don't respond to his little update texts from work. After years of catching every word he threw away, after years of reaching for a partner who flinched from my hand every single time, I finally went quiet. And the horrible irony is that my silence, my surrender, my grief, my giving up, is the very thing that makes him most comfortable. He pushed me away every time he lied, every time I tried to have a conversation with the person I thought was my best friend, my partner, my husband. The betrayal piled too high. I can't climb over it anymore, and I've stopped trying. I've given up. And I lie awake asking myself, is it my fault for thinking this way? Is it my fault that he's gotten worse? What am I even supposed to do to move forward from a place like this? Those questions don't have easy answers, and I won't pretend they do. But there are some things about my situation I need you to understand, because they're the bars on the cage, and without them you can't really see why the door isn't as open as it looks. The first thing, I'm a military spouse, and we're not living in the States anymore. So all the advice I imagined hearing, just leave while he's at work, grab a bag, get on a plane, go home to your family, it doesn't apply to a life like mine. I can't simply vanish one afternoon. To leave, I'd have to go through official channels, notify his chain of command, and the moment I did that, my husband would know I was trying to get out. There's no quiet exit door. Every path out runs straight through him. People in the comments always have the answer, and the answer is always so simple, and the answer always assumes a life that looks like theirs. Just go to your mom's. I don't have a just. My mom is an ocean and a passport and a plane ticket I can't buy with money I'm not allowed to touch away. Just call a lawyer. With what and from where? In a country whose laws I don't even fully understand, on a status that's tied to his job and not my own. The walls of this cage aren't the kind you can see in a photograph. They're made of logistics and geography, and the specific, deliberate way my whole life got built so that every road out passes through the one man I'm trying to escape. I'm not staying because I don't want to leave. I want to tell that to every person who's ever typed, just leave, like it was a revelation. I'm staying because the exits were sealed long before I ever thought to look for them. And before anyone gets the wrong idea about me, I'm not one of those military wives who wears her husband's rank like it's her own personality. I genuinely don't even know half the lingo. I never claimed his service as mine. I'm just a woman who followed the man she loved into a life far from everyone else she loved, and then found herself trapped in it. The second thing, the pregnancy wasn't planned. I told you we tried for years and I'd given up hope. So when my daughter came, she came as a complete surprise, the only good surprise in this entire story. I'm a stay-at-home mom now. I don't work, which means I don't have my own income, which is one more bar on the cage. But that little girl is my whole world. I love her with a fierceness I didn't know I had in me, and the single clearest thought in my head, the one that cuts through all the fog, is this: I never want her to grow up watching what I'm living. So I hide it. When the hard moments hit, I make sure she doesn't see my face. And I'll give Marcus this because it's true, he's a good father to her. Genuinely. He's just a terrible husband to me. Somehow he found room to be both. I watch him with her sometimes from the doorway, and it undoes me every time. He gets down on the floor with her. He's patient in a way he never once was with me, narrating the world to her in that low, gentle voice, letting her grab his finger, laughing, really laughing, when she does something small and ordinary and miraculous. And I stand there torn clean in half because the love I feel watching them is real, and so is the grief, and they live in the exact same breath. That's the cruelty I never expected. If he were a monster all the way through, I could hate him cleanly and that hate could carry me out the door. But he isn't. He's a wonderful father and a ruined husband stitched into one body. And our daughter only gets to keep the wonderful half if I stay close enough to the ruined one to keep absorbing the damage myself. The third thing, and this is the one that makes my chest go tight, he provides everything. He pays for all of it and he wields that fact like a blade. Out of nowhere he'll snap, angrily, "Don't you understand the sacrifices I make for you?" And it lands exactly the way he wants it to, leaving me feeling like a burden, like a debt that can never be repaid. I'm not allowed to ask about money. Not about finances, not about his money. The accounts, the numbers, the future, all of it sealed off behind another one of his rules, the same way his ex-wife was sealed off, the same way every uncomfortable truth got sealed off. I live in a house I'm not allowed to understand the cost of. I don't know how much is in our accounts. I want you to sit with how strange that is, a grown woman, a married woman, a mother with no idea what her own household holds. I don't know our balance. I don't know what he earns, beyond the rough shape of it. I don't know if there are savings or debts or accounts I've never seen, and every time I've reached toward those questions I've hit the same cold wall I hit with everything else. That's my business. Why do you need to know? Don't you trust me to take care of it? And so I've been kept very deliberately in a state where I couldn't leave even if every other door swung open, because I don't have the first thing you need to walk out into the world on your own. I don't have the money, and I'm not even allowed to know where it is. Drop a comment below. Do you think she made the right call by going quiet? Or did silence just hand him the very thing he was after? Because I've turned it over and over, and I genuinely can't tell anymore whether I chose peace or just stopped fighting. I've raised the word divorce 3 separate times now. 3 times. And every single time his answer was the same, and it was a wall I could not climb. I'll kill myself before that even happens. And when I went quiet, stunned, he'd twist it tighter. You seriously want me dead, don't you? How do you answer that? How do you walk out a door that he's wired with your own guilt? Every time I reach for the handle, he makes leaving feel like murder. The first time he said it, I actually believed I'd caused it. That's the thing about a threat like that, it doesn't feel like manipulation in the moment. It feels like you've finally pushed a good man to the edge of something terrible. And now his life is in your hands. And the only way to save it is to put the word divorce back in the box and never take it out again. So I did. I held him and apologized. Apologized. Can you believe it? For wanting out of a marriage that was crushing me. By the 3rd time he said it, something in me had gone quieter and colder, and I noticed how smoothly the words came, how they always arrived at exactly the moment I got close to leaving, and never any other time. I noticed he never seemed to be in any danger on the ordinary days, only on the days I found my spine. And realizing that didn't free me. It just added one more lock to the door because now I had to carry both the fear that he meant it and the sickening suspicion that he didn't. And either way I was the one who couldn't move. I've tried to leave before. More times than I've admitted to anyone. But I was raised in a family where you don't give up on a marriage, where you don't give up on a person, you forgive, you keep trying, you stay through the bad parts because the bad parts are supposed to be the test of whether your love is real. That's what I absorbed as a girl, watching the people who raised me. So I'm not passive, even though from the outside it might look that way. I'm just the only one who ever pulled the rope. For 9 years, I held the whole thing together by myself and called it commitment, because that's the only word I'd been given for it. There was a night, maybe a year ago, when I got the farthest I've ever gotten. I packed a bag. Actually packed it, folded the baby's little things in with mine, zipped it shut, set it by the door. I stood in that entryway with my hand on the strap and the cold knob inches away, and I genuinely tried to make my hand close around it. And I thought of my mother, and her mother, and every woman in my family who'd stayed, who'd forgiven, who'd worn their endurance like a medal and passed the lesson down to me with their love. You don't quit. You don't break a family. And the weight of all those women standing behind me in that hallway was heavier than the bag, heavier than the door, and I unpacked it before he ever knew it had been packed. I folded the baby's clothes back into the drawer one by one. I've never told a soul that until right now. Our marriage as husband and wife, the physical part, the intimacy, all but died after I found everything during the pregnancy. How could it not? You can't be close to someone whose secret life you just finished excavating. And his compulsions only deepened in the same stretch. Like the more distance opened up between us, the more he disappeared into the screen. When I say I was blindsided, I want to be precise about what I mean. It wasn't that I'd never caught him before. I had the photo, the ex-wife, the little lies stitched all through the years. It was that I never grasped the sheer scale of it until that moment, pregnant and digging through his phone. The depth of the disrespect, the constancy of the lying, the number of secrets. It was like getting struck on the head so hard that a blur I'd lived inside for years suddenly snapped into focus, and I finally saw him clearly. And what I saw was 2 men wearing the same face. One loving and kind, who warmed up my car and bought me houses for my birthday. One cold and avoidant and dishonest, who hid women and accounts and his whole self from me. They took turns. Round and round, a toxic carousel I couldn't get off of, never knowing which Marcus would be sitting at the breakfast table. I used to lie awake trying to figure out which one was the real him and which one was the mask, as if solving that riddle would tell me what to do. The kind man, surely, was the true Marcus, and the cold one was just stress, just the job, just a phase he'd grow out of. That's the version I clung to for years. But I've come to a harder answer than that. They're both real. That's the whole horror of it. The man who warmed up my car and the man who hid 2 years of betrayal are the same man. Fully, in every moment, and the kindness was never the truth peeking through the cruelty any more than the cruelty was a crack in the kindness. He's just a person who could do both and feel entitled to both, and the warmth wasn't a contradiction of the lying. It was part of the same machine, the part that kept me sitting at the breakfast table, waiting to see which face would look up at me over the coffee. All I ever wanted was loyalty, open communication, love, the plainest, most basic things a person can ask for inside a marriage. And he managed to make me feel like wanting them made me greedy, like I was the one asking for too much when all I was asking for was the bare minimum. That's the cruelest trick of it all. He took the most reasonable needs a human heart can have and convinced me they were a burden I was placing on him. I think that's the part that took the longest to heal, and the part that's still healing. Not the cheating, even the redefinition of myself. Because for 9 years I slowly let him teach me that my needs were excessive. That a wife who wanted to be talked to was needy. That a wife who wanted honesty was paranoid. That a wife who wanted to know about the household finances was nagging, controlling, ungrateful. I absorbed all of it so completely that by the end I'd pre-shrunk every desire before it ever left my mouth, apologizing for wanting water in the middle of a drought. And the work I'm doing now, quietly, in the small hours when the baby's asleep and the house is dark, is the slow work of unlearning that, of remembering that none of what I wanted was ever too much. It was the floor. It was the absolute floor of what one person owes another inside a marriage, and I'd been talked into believing it was the ceiling. So here I am, 33 years old, in a country that isn't mine, married to a man I no longer recognize, raising a daughter I'd walk through fire for, and giving the silence he always wanted. I used to think the loudest thing in a failing marriage was the fighting. I was wrong. The loudest thing is the silence that comes after, when one person finally stops reaching and the other person mistakes that stillness for peace. I don't know how this ends. I want to be honest with you about that, because I think you came here for an ending and I don't have one to give you yet. What I have is a daughter who's starting to laugh at the world, and a little money I've started quietly setting aside in ways I won't say out loud, and a passport in a drawer, and a slowly returning sense that the woman who packed that bag and unpacked it might one day pack it again and mean it. I have the small, stubborn fact that I told this story at all, that after 9 years of enforced silence, I finally let the words out somewhere, even if it's only here, even if his name isn't really Marcus. That's not nothing. For me, right now, that's almost everything. If there's anything I've learned from all of this, it's that staying isn't always the brave choice, and leaving isn't always the weak one. Sometimes we get those exactly backwards. I was taught that love means never giving up, but no one ever told me that holding on to someone who keeps letting go can quietly cost you your whole self. I gave him his peace. I'm still learning how to give myself mine. Guys, the goal here is 1,000 subscribers on this channel, and we are getting closer every single day. If you have not hit subscribe yet, please consider it. It genuinely makes a difference. Thank you for being here.